It's Fat Kitty. What did you think of that intro on Thursday night where we used all the cats?
On Thursday night?
Yeah, that was when I did the escape of that 10. Were you there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I didn't see the intro for it for some
and
reason.
use the outro as well. So you're gonna have to go back and look at
I have
either.
to go back and watch it. I don't think I saw the intro and the outro. I had to go to sleep before you were done because
Yeah,
I'm on the East Coast, so
and I was dragging that out for
I
quite a
was
while.
tired. It's like it's 1 a.m. I gotta work tomorrow.
Yep. So yeah. We did it at the outro and the intro. So either one.
Okay, I'll go back and watch. I don't know how I didn't see the intro.
We solicited cat pictures. So I sent
Was it
one of
all
them.
Was it all cats? I mean, because I cat pictures were solicited for me. Now I feel bad that I
Yeah.
missed it. I'm
I guess
sorry.
you probably didn't know why. You were just like, okay, here's cat pictures. I got plenty.
I do have a lot of cat pictures. I have a lot of cats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really oppressed by cats. I just thought I'd point that out. Yeah.
Indeed.
We got a lot of people here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, people. Today we're talking about gas, specifically that carbon dioxide
Got
gas.
some right here, some carbonation. You you can't just dump salsa in your tank. It's not enough.
So are you saying that's a myth, Takashi Amano discovering CO2 by spilling his gin and tonic into his tank?
That's a fun myth.
It is fun to be like drunk and stumbling around, spilling your drink into the tank, and it's like discovering, oh my God, my plants could look so much better.
So much better if I just am a sloppier drunk.
But
I don't buy it.
CO2 can make your plants look hell
It's
of a
the
lot
real
better.
it's the real deal. It's a drug I'm addicted to. Maybe if I had ultra soft water, I would be willing to go without it. But I don't, so I'm not.
But even still, if you did have ultra soft water, just imagine what just a little drip of CO2, just a little bit.
Just a hit, just a hit.
Hmm. Yeah. And
Someone
then you have a fish room, you could get like a 10-pound cylinder and you could do less than a bubble a second on each of your tanks with a bunch of manifolds. And yeah.
I don't know. For a fish room, you still probably want a 20-pound cylinder at least.
Okay, 20-pound, whatever.
But still,
Whatever you can do.
no, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's worth it. It's worth it. I love it. I can understand if you don't want to do it. Maybe it's not your jam. If you're breeding, maybe you don't want to mess with it for all your tanks. I get that.
Right.
But
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it in all my tanks, but how many do I have now? So I got this 90 behind me with CO2, and that's gone full fledged because why not? I mean, just as much as I can put in there.
exactly.
And then I have in the same room my beta tank going with CO2 just because I try out various plants in there, and it I like to keep that looking good. And living room tank, of course, the plant farm, and then the that aquascape contest tank that I did for Secret History, and then right next to it there's the quarantine tank that was like a mini plant farm for a while. So that's 6 of the 16 tanks that I've got.
And I have 3 tanks, and all 3 have CO2. And
because why not? If I had 3 tanks,
and I don't think I will ever do a tank without CO2 because I don't think I ever will. I don't breed, and I don't keep mystery snails. So, yeah.
So the people who maybe it's not because they're breeding or anything, maybe they're just afraid of CO2. I had some apprehension whenever I started. Like for a while, I avoided it because I would hear things, for example, the pH swing. I thought that was a problem.
Yeah, and I know people who drop their pH 1.5 every single day.
Yep, and then it goes back up at night.
Not every fish can handle 1.5. but I've yet to see a fish that can't handle a point. Now, is that true of every fish? I don't know. I have not kept every fish. However, fish can handle pH changes. They're fine.
It happens in the wild all the time when it
Exactly.
rains. At night, there's a crap ton of plants are releasing CO2 themselves.
Or even as they swim through different environments, if they
Hmm.
swim around a spring, that will have CO2 dissolved in it. Or if they swim down through an area that has a bunch of rotting leaves or something, that'll have different
Yep.
pHs. And so those can be really sudden.
Yeah, very drastic.
Yeah, and they're fine. They're fine. So that shouldn't scare you. I mean, for me, when I first started, so I always had CO2 in my tanks. I started with yeast and bottles of CO2 the DIY way, and that's because of cost. I mean, that
Right.
was the biggest prohibitor for me because I was a very poor graduate student surviving on no money. And I get
Mhm.
that. But I very soon, probably within 3 or 4 months, gave up on DIY CO2 because it's not worth it.
Yeah, because there's a cost associated with getting the equipment for it,
Mhm.
but once you've done that,
Yeah.
it's basically nothing. It's a
Yep.
for when I need to refill a
Yep.
cylinder, it's $1 a pound,
Yep. And for me, it's even less than that, just because of where I get mine filled. But
and
if you
you
look
have a
at the
Jake
cost,
to bring it for you, right?
well, yeah, or I just walk over there. I live
Oh,
literally within walking distance
that's
of
nice.
the welding shop. So they're only open Monday through Friday, so I'll just walk over and get my
Okay.
cylinder filled. It's really not a big deal for me. Um, but when you look at the cost of yeast and the sugar, and you need to, so I didn't use 2-liter bottles. I use these gallon jugs of like apple juice that I would like drink the juice out of and use that. But
Mhm.
like you have to replace the tubing. You're If you don't have like a bottle in between the bottles, like of plain water, it gets really scummy. I had a pet knock over the bottle once, my dog did, and it made a giant mess. It's
Ugh.
a giant hassle, and you will get to the point where you're like, I don't want to deal with this. And most people either quit the DIY CO2 and just do no CO2, or they just upgrade to pressurized. I have
Right.
not. I'm sure there's someone out there who'll be like, well, but what about me? I've been doing it for 7 years, but I have never seen anyone who
So
can.
I did want to bring up Ian Atkins. He's got this DIY CO2 system that's like it's a step above like what you've done with the Coke bottles or the apple juice bottles. It has a regulator, it has a
Yeah.
pressurized container, and he mixes it. And I mean, I don't know how often he's
So
got
does
to,
he
but
use like citric acid
could
and
be, yeah.
yeah, so I've seen that before. They didn't have those when I first
Hmm.
started, that used a regulator so you could actually control the
Yeah.
amount of gas that was put into the tank. They didn't have that.
And for somebody like him who lives in an area where the water is essentially RO out of the tap,
We
a little bit of CO2 DIY, it's
Sure,
cheap, and
sure. Mhm.
so
And
that's
that's the
definitely a way to
thing, like,
go.
I could never add enough CO2 to my water in Iowa where it made a damn bit of difference until I, went pressurized, so it was worth it for me, still worth it, obviously, because I keep doing it, but, DIY CO2, I just wouldn't bother, honestly.
Nah, not if you're trying to
Wouldn't
do
bother.
like 10 bubbles a second into something.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, for bigger tanks, even with, even if you have soft water with bigger tanks, it's just hard to get enough. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's
And so let's see. So the pH swing, obviously you want to make sure that your fish can handle it, but most of them can handle a point.
yeah,
Rainbow fish certainly can.
and I've kept a lot of different community fish. The most sensitive fish that I've seen are Some gobies are a little fussier. The like the neon gobies or the Rhodolaris gobies, they're a little more sensitive, but they can still handle a full point.
Yeah, and
So
of course, pretty much any South American fish doesn't have a problem with it.
yeah, so Ian says he uses the citric acid and baking soda.
Hmm.
It lasts him a month in a 20 gallons. So that's
I,
not bad. That's
I
not
thought
bad.
it was
Then
a little
again,
longer than that.
it's a small tank. It's a 20 gallon and he has soft water. He doesn't need a ton of CO2. So yeah, that's not a bad deal. And with the thing is with the citric acid and baking soda, it's you don't get a lot of the yeasty residue. Do
Uh,
with that what you will, Matt.
Yeasty residue. Sorry, it was
Ooh,
my head went there too. Okay.
you sure did. I used to work on yeast. I mean, I was a
Uh,
yeast researcher in a former life, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. But I mean, that's always an issue. Also, like you couldn't turn it off at night. So you're just wasting CO2 or just go into your tank and do nothing for you. So
yeah, and even like refilling it once a month, I would get tired of that very quickly. I
yeah,
don't I don't like high maintenance things. I just like
yeah. I
very
mean,
few exceptions.
and that's why I finally upgraded to a 10-pound cylinder for these. I have one regulator and a manifold driving two tanks, and it lasts me, I think like 3 or 4 months. So not too bad. And again, I live very close to the CO2 store. So, but this is about pressurized CO2. This is not about DIY
Yeah.
CO2. So let's
So
talk about what you need to get going.
well, first you need the CO2 cylinder itself.
You do. And I have bought mine either. A lot of times, the places where you buy regulators from, you can only buy a 5-pound cylinder. And I highly suggest to you to get the biggest cylinder that both fits in your stand and that you can afford. So I upgraded to a 10-gallon. Someday, if I have a bigger tank, I'm going to try to get a 20-gallon just because it's more convenient for your life. You can get 5-pound cylinders. It's fine. They work fine, but it's not significantly more expensive to get.
That's right.
It's only a few dollars more to get a bigger cylinder and it'll last longer for you. So,
So at my the fire extinguisher place that I get my CO2 filled, my
mhm,
first cylinder I ever bought was from them. It was just
right.
it was a refurb. It was $60. It
Mhm,
already came with CO2 in it.
yep. So then you need to,
Unfortunately, they don't sell or they have trouble for some reason getting anything bigger than fives. They don't normally carry them, and so I've ordered the other cylinders from Amazon,
yeah,
and you pay a little more. It's like I think maybe I paid
yeah.
120 for my 20-pound.
So you do need to find a shop by you that will
Hmm.
fill CO2 cylinders. Some of them will swap, a lot of them will swap cylinders. So you think you have the shiny, pretty cylinder and they exchange it and they give you an old beat up one. So just be aware of that if they swap. Now, mine directly fills mine. So if I cared about a shiny cylinder, which I don't because it's in my stand, but I would get mine back. I fill mine at a welding shop. It's called, and it's a small chain in the Midwest. It's hmm,
And the welding shop doesn't do the cylinder exchange. They actually fill yours because.
so if you need food grade CO2, so like beverage grade for beer, they
Mhm.
send it out. But I don't need that for an aquarium. Any grade, it's fine. Um,
Yeah.
so
So
it's called the welding supply near me is TJ Nowak Supply Company, and they're a small
okay.
chain. Also, Air Gas is another one that I've seen a lot of. You can get them filled there. Sometimes paintball stores will fill cylinders. And if you have a really little tank, there are paintball regulators you can get that fit those smaller tanks, and that might be an option for you, like for
Mhm.
nano tanks.
There's
Um,
also adapt if you have a big like a normal size regulator, but you don't want to use a big tank. They have adapters to put them on paintball cylinders.
yeah. So that's another option. But you do need to find a store near that will fill tanks. But I guarantee you there's something. If you live in even a minor metropolitan area, there's something. Look for welding shops, look for fire extinguisher shops. I mean, I live like a block from a place. I can walk over and get it. So there is
Yeah.
something for you, I promise you, because people who are welders have to get their CO2 filled.
Hmm.
So there's something.
Yeah. Just found the one place that's easy enough.
Exactly. And a $10 refill for me is, I don't know, $16 or something. It's not much.
For the
But
10 pound.
yeah, but it does vary a lot by region. So, ask what the price is.
Well, I
Sydney
feel
is,
like, yeah, if you go to those beer brewing places for the food grade CO2,
mhm,
you're going to pay a lot and you don't need that.
yeah. But if you go to a welding shop, just tell them you don't need the food grade because you don't. It's fine.
Yep.
It's fine. You're not poisoning your fish. It's fine. So, I mean, food grade because it has to meet certain regulations. That's why it's more expensive. So, yeah. So, Brookley Bell asked, could you just polish a dirty cylinder if you wanted a shiny one? I wouldn't recommend that because you don't want to do anything to
Thin the metal.
compromise the integrity of your cylinder. You need to treat it with kindness. Like, you could maybe put a sticker on it if you didn't like it, but I wouldn't do a thing to it because they may not, they have to, oh, what's that called? They have to certify a cylinder for 5 years or something. They have to stat it or something it's called.
So for Brookley, and I know that she could easily do this, what I would recommend is that you just build some kind of hideaway for the
Yep.
cylinder, and you
Yep.
can set stuff on it, like, or like a little cabinet thing.
Yep. And I keep mine in my stand, and that's a good idea anyways, because you don't want, and Stephen knows all about this, you don't want it where your kids or your pets can bump it.
Yep. So that was the other fear that actually came true, about CO2, and the fact
Mhm.
that there is such thing as too much, and too much will plummet your pH to ridiculously
Yep.
low levels,
Yep.
and it will deplete all of the oxygen, and your fish won't be able to breathe
So,
unless you've
yep,
got the ones that can breathe air.
yep. And so what will happen is your fish will gasp at the surface
Hmm.
and they may die.
Yep.
I had a couple of times where my CO2 has been too high and I see my fish gasping, drop in an air stone, turn off the CO2, they're fine.
Right.
Then a little bit of time, maybe do a water change, and they're fine. But if it goes on too long, they're not.
Yeah, and
So,
that's what happened is bumping the regulator. Something got the needle valve turned up, and I didn't catch it for 3.5 hours. And
yeah,
so wake up to a bunch of dead fish. My gourami was
yep,
kind of not doing well, passed out, to the point where, like, I could just like grab him with my hand and got him into another tank.
yeah,
My Corys were passed out, but they were okay. Plecos were passed out. One
yeah,
of one of them survived, but everything else, rainbow fish, no, they couldn't handle that.
yeah. It's I mean, I've had CO2 related tragedies too, and we'll talk about that in a minute too.
Mm,
So the next thing is you need a regulator.
yep,
Um, and I highly recommend getting a regulator that's so you can build a regulator yourself. If you are a handy person, Rex Grigg, Grigg, he has plans online for building regulators. You need a very high quality needle valve, and you can use a beer regulator. Um, but I cannot give you advice on how to do that. I do not DIY anything.
I wouldn't DIY
However,
that.
yeah, I mean, but those are, I mean,
Mm.
people who do it, they're very high quality. You get a really good needle valve on it, and it's fine. I don't want to do that though. That's not what
Is
I
it
do.
cheaper to DIY it if you're doing high quality parts like that? I mean, you still have to
I don't think you
buy the
save, I don't think
gauges
you,
and the.
I don't think you save that much money, but you save some money, especially if you live in a place that has beer regulators. Like if you live in a place where home brewing is a big thing,
Mhm.
You can get a regulator for not that expensive, and then you just buy the needle valve. But I am not here to give you advice on that because I can't DIY anything.
I like to DIY, but I wouldn't do that. I would just buy a regulator. And here's the
So,
thing. So, yeah, there are those cheap regulators. That was your CO2 tragedy, is buying a cheap ass regulator that instead of shutting off when you get to the end of life, it just dumped the rest
yep.
of the CO2 in the tank, right?
Yep. And so that's my tragedy. So I was a poor grad student. I had no money. And I bought a regulator made by Milwaukee, which was very cheap. And it's really hard to dial those in, first of all. The needle valve is not very good. And so it's just really hard to control the bubble rate. So, I mean, it would be high, then you'd walk by it and it'd be low, and then you try to get it fussing in. And it was just, yeah. So that was hard. And then they do something called end of tank dump. So
Mhm.
where they're near the end of their lifetime, they stick open and they just dump about a half a pound of CO2 in your tank within minutes. So I lost a full tank of fish and another tank of shrimp.
Oof.
And I quit the hobby for a while after that because I was just done. I mean, I was financially done, I was emotionally done, I was just done. And so
Mhm.
now, every time I've used CO2 since then, I spend the money. I use Greenleaf aquariums. They're expensive. They're the most expensive. I think it's worth it. Their service is good. They're rock steady. They have a great reputation. Is that to say that other ones won't work? Sure, but I'm not gonna fuck around with it. I have the money to do it right, and I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna mess around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But on the on the topic of cheap regulators, so I've
yeah.
tried them, and I've gone through several cylinders with these regulators, so I know that they don't do the end of tank dump.
Yeah. And you know
But
what? I haven't tried every brand of regulator. I just, I know these work. I know they have a good reputation.
there
And
are bad
how
ones
many
out there for
regulators do
sure.
you need to buy? Like,
Hmm.
that's the other thing. You can get a regulator, you can get a manifold for them that will drive multiple tanks. So you don't need that many of them. Um,
Right.
the only one, like if the co-op, I know that they're going to release one. I would be willing to get one of theirs because I know that they exhaustively test their products and I know they have great customer service. Like, I would trust theirs. But otherwise, I don't think I would ever get a regulator that wasn't Greenleaf Aquariums, GLA, and they're expensive. But
That's the one that's $300, right?
something like that, yeah. But like, how many tanks do I have? I have two regulators for three tanks. Um, it's not like I need to buy multiple of them. And,
Mm.
you know, it's just worth it to me for peace of mind. We all have, because I've been burned.
Yeah, I can
So,
see that for sure.
yeah.
So the F Zone, the dual stage regulator from F Zone, it is, I want to say it's like $80 or $90. I have three of them. Well, one of them is like the multi. You can add more to them, more bubble counters and all that to them.
Mhm.
Um, but I can attest that they do not do the end of tank dump. But I also have a CO2 art one. That one's 150, and then now I have the SR Aquaristics or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
That one's $200 regulator,
Mhm.
and I can say that the $200 regulator is my favorite regulator. The
Yeah.
150 is my second favorite regulator, and the F zones are my third favorite regulator.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is like, it's so easy to dial in these GLAs.
Yes,
Like, you go
yes,
over,
that's
you,
exactly why I find that's why exactly why I find these to be my favorite ones is by how
yeah.
easy it is to dial
I
them in.
mean, I'm not a person who tests equipment. You got to go elsewhere for that. But you get what you pay for on a lot of
Yeah,
things in life. And it's just so nice for me to be able to dial in my CO2 easily because every time you change your cylinder, unless you have a pH meter controlling it, which I've thought about doing, You have to dial that in every single time you change your
Yep.
cylinder. And I don't want
Yep.
it to be hard because for the health of my fish and for the health of my mental health,
Mm-hmm.
I just want it to be easy. So it is worth it to me for that. But I am thinking about investing in a pH controller.
Yep. I've been thinking about that ever since I did the CO2 apocalypse back in July. I just
Right.
haven't pulled the trigger on one.
Also, it's a way to, I mean, because the pH you're targeting,
Yeah.
the pH you're starting with, and like you get the most consistent results. If I had a big tank, so my biggest tank's a 90, but if I had a bigger tank than that, for sure I would do it because you can't count bubbles per second at a certain rate.
Yeah.
It's
See,
just
I've counted mine by recording it in slow-mo on my phone just to
yeah.
see.
But like if you have like 180-gallon tank,
Oh
like
my God. No,
really
yeah.
hard at a certain point. And even with a 40, like I'm adding a stream of CO2. It's not like, oh, one bubble a second, two bubbles a second. Like it's a lot. So, I do think those pH controller ones are worth it. That's something I need to learn more about. I'm not really great with tech. So, yeah.
They don't seem that complicated though. I
No,
mean,
they're
they
not. But
seem pretty,
I'm very intimidated by technology.
yeah. You
So
just
I
got to
mean,
get over the hump, the learning curve, and
I
then,
know. And Jake would help me with it because
mhm.
that's another thing. Like I can't change my CO2 by myself because like you have to torque and untorque bolts, and my wrists and hands are kind of delicate. So I can help do that. You know, that's okay. He does it for me. Yes, you need a regulator. You need CO2 proof tubing. You cannot
Yes.
use ordinary airline tubing because that is over time will become CO2 permeable and you will lose gas.
Right. It gets brittle and cracks, and yeah, that is as well. It's just
Yeah.
CO2 is super
Yeah.
acidic, I guess, is what the
Yep.
issue is.
So wherever you buy your regulator from, which Brooklyn, I use Greenleaf Aquariums, GLA. And the owner is named Orlando. He's very helpful. So if you
That's a
like,
$300 regulator, Brookley.
really, that's a lot of money, but
I can help you dial in an F zone if your budget's low, though.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
and it depends on your budget. If you need
mm,
9 regulators, yeah, I think twice about that too. But if you
yeah,
need 1 or 2,
she's got all of her fish tanks right now in relatively like one space.
it's just
Every single tank she does has to be like this amazing immaculate aquascape. So I know that
yeah,
once she gets started with CO2,
just gonna
she's
want
not going to stop at
it.
one tank. She's going to
Yep,
do the whole front. So
yep,
I'm like going to get her set up with one, well, so she can put a manifold on it and just start going
yeah. It's a
like,
drug. It's a drug.
mm-hmm. It's a
So
drug for your plants, and it's a drug for your eyes when you see what it does to your plants.
right. So, yes, you need CO2 proof tubing, you need the regulator, and then you need a way to diffuse the CO2 in your tank. And there's a lot of options you can use. If you have a little bitty tank, you can use a little diffuser. So, this is a glass one. They also make them in plastic, but it's got some fritted glass in it, and it makes these itty bitty bitty fine bubbles that are
Yeah.
directional. So you don't want to use like an air stone. The bubbles will be too big. You don't want to use like a lime wood. You could use a lime wood diffuser, but you know, they're not directional, so they're going to spray everywhere and they clog up.
Yeah.
So just get one of these. You can get them on Amazon. I don't know even who makes this, but it's like $15 or $20. Buy 2 of them. And the reason for that is like when algae clogs them up, you can
Just
take it
soak them.
out and then soak it in bleach, and then you've got a fresh one ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take the one you soaked in bleach overnight, and you can soak it in chlorinator water, and then that one's ready for you too. So just buy 2 of them. Also, then you have a backup if you break them because they're glass. You can break them.
That's
So
another point about not buying a cheap regulator is because the cheap regulators also they'll tend to have a lower working pressure, and you need very high relatively high working pressure for a lot of those diffusers. Otherwise, they won't push enough CO2 through that diffuser through the ceramic. I had that issue. The first regulator I bought, I was dumb, and I bought one. I think it was a single stage. I think it's meant for
Mm,
like to add CO2 in a room to terrestrial plants or something like that.
oh,
It did
yeah.
not. So it had a fixed working pressure. You couldn't adjust it at all,
You know,
and you
get
couldn't do more than
one
a bubble a
that's
second.
yeah, get one that's for aquariums
Right.
that, you know,
I thought it
eventually
was. I just didn't know anything about
eventually
it.
the co-op is gonna have one out, and like maybe I'm a co-op shill, but they do test their products. They have
Hmm.
great customer service. They stand behind them. I think the cost from what they quoted is going to be pretty reasonable, especially for what you get. Um, I would even trust that, and I'm a little gun shy about regulators, so
Yeah.
that's an option too. But who knows when that'll get here? No.
I mean, they're talking about it like it's really on its way. Like
Yeah, I
and
mean,
he has a relatively like decent estimate for the price point because I asked him a few streams ago and he said like it was
yeah.
in the 120 range. And so that sounds like it's going to
That's
be a pretty
really,
solid.
really
Yeah.
reasonable, and with the co-op, you're
Right.
paying for great customer service, and I
Yep.
know that every time I've dealt with them, that they get back to you promptly, they help you with your problem, they stand behind their products.
Because Candy is
So,
awesome.
she's awesome. She is an awesome woman. So, I would trust the co-op regulator, and that would be quite a bit less expensive.
Hmm.
So, when that gets here, that can be an option. So to dispense your tank, you can use these little guys. This is not my first choice for bigger tanks. This is not what I have on these two tanks. I use an inline diffuser. Steven doesn't like these, so there's pros and cons to everything.
So which
Um,
one do you use?
I use it's made by Nylock G, and it's like
Oh, do we have the same one? Hold on. What a terrible picture because it's got cat hair all over it, but I'm going to show it anyway. Here we go.
yep,
Ta-da.
yep.
Same
And a
one?
couple of companies make those, and I love them. And the reason I like them is they're just like this, but they're contained. And so you don't get algae growing on the fritted glass. Um, the downside to it, it's both a downside and an upside. So you can see the CO2 bubbles spraying in your tank, which some people don't like. I kind of like it. I like the CO2 mist. And according to Tom Barr, who knows far more about aquatic plants than I do, so I'm going to give him that, there are some plants that prefer CO2 directly misting them because they can use that better than dissolved CO2. Now,
Yes.
I don't know. I don't
Wasn't
know.
it we were looking up blood vomit and that one literally said like you want to aim your current through
Yeah.
in your CO2 bubbles at the blood
Yeah.
vomit and I'm
So
like
there are some plants, especially fussy ones, that do better with misted CO2. Now,
So let's see.
you don't have to do that. So that's a diffuser. That's like this
Yeah.
one, but this
That's
one
the
is all
Neo.
glass.
Yeah, it's a drop checker. Well, I guess we'll talk about that and whether or not
Yeah,
you need one. So this is why I was like, I hate these because you get your super Sprite can
you do,
bubbly
and
tank
you'll
for a
be using
while.
more of that. Like your tank is going to turn into a spray can anyways with CO2, no matter what method you use to fuse it, because all those beautiful oxygen bubbles coming off your plants will turn it into a soda fountain. So
Hmm.
at the beginning of the day, I get a little bit of spraying, but like right now, the CO2 has been going for I don't know, for 5 hours now, and so it's at its peak, and so yeah, I mean the tank's a soda fountain, but
Yep.
I
And you
like
can see
it.
the purling on the plants too. It's just everywhere. It's oxygen and
Yeah,
CO2.
yeah, and I like it. It's not great for pictures, but you know what? I keep my tanks for me, not for my Instagram page.
Well, damn it. I'm a YouTuber.
That's right.
Serious business YouTuber.
I mean, but if you want to take good looking videos, you should do it before your CO2 comes
Yeah.
on and then turn your lights up so the water is more still.
Yep. Yep.
So
I
that's
I turn mine off if I have to do it.
Mhm.
It really I do a lot of my pictures at night in certain tanks, except when you've got stem plants and things that like turn up in the middle of the night, and so they don't look perfect.
Yep.
Like my the dwarf lotus, all the leaves like turn away.
They do. They kind of come upward. So
Hmm.
these little guys like this, these are good choices for little tanks. They are not going to diffuse your CO2 well enough for a bigger tank. 40 breeder might be pushing it with this. Certainly not a 90. This is not big enough. So that's why I use the inline diffuser for that. Now,
I
if
have a large version that diffuser in the plant farm, and it's doing okay.
yeah, it does okay. But for a 90,
No, definitely not.
probably
So
not
for a
good.
90, I can show you what I did.
Yeah, so you can use something called a reactor.
Yes. I'm trying to see. There's a final. I only ever took a photo of mine, but I have an FX6 on my 90, and so like the instructions for those CO2 reactors online are like not big enough. So I like made mine twice as big as the Rex Griggs.
Yeah. So what the reactor does is it uses Venturi force, which I'm sorry, I don't really understand, but it just mixes the bubbles of the CO2
Mhm.
into the water, and so you get 100% dissolution. And this is kind of what you have to do for very big tanks. So someday I'm going to have a tank bigger than this 90. I'm going to use, you either have to use a reactor or you have to have like multiple outlets of CO2 spraying it in,
Right.
which you could do also.
Here
But I'd probably go with a reactor.
here we go. This isn't mine, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
Mine is more shaped like a saxophone,
Yep.
the
So
way I
you can
built
build
mine,
these
but yeah.
yourself. You can
Neat.
also buy reactors. I'm going to say right now, the one I bought, I tried to use it and it leaked.
Oh, that
So
sucks.
I quit using it and I switched to the little Nylac G diffuser, which I've been happy with. But you can build your own. One thing to be aware of is the more things you plumb in line to your filter, you do reduce your flow. Now, I mean, I've got a big old FX6 on mine, so
Yeah.
whatever. But just keep that in mind. Like the more stuff in line, the less your flow is through your filter.
Yeah.
So
But this is very similar because he used big, like it was like a 2 or 3 inch PVC, and yeah, essentially you've got like three holes in it: the water in, water out, and CO2 in. And the water in, there's like you said, Venturi. It's like the pressure from the water passing by sucks in the CO2, and ideally every bit of it is dissolved before it even
yep,
gets to your tank.
yeah.
Now with the FX6 and how fast they go, there's still a little bit of bubbles, but the reason I love this reactor is that my 90 gallon, even though I'm blasting the crap out of it with CO2, does not look like a Sprite can. So it's always photogenic.
However, kind of the downside of that is so one of the annoying things about CO2 regulators is sometimes when you're setting them up, they leak. And you have to find where that leak is and you have to know where the leak is. So what you do is you get a spray bottle and you fill it with some soapy water and you
Hmm.
spray along all of the connections of it and you look for little bubbles fizzing out. And that's where the leak is. And then you have to disassemble it, put some plumber's tape around the join and reconnect it.
Yeah.
So I always know when my CO2 is running because I can see a mist. But in that, you don't see a mist. So,
Funny you mentioned that because it just happened to me in the 90 on my 20-pound cylinder. Didn't know I had a leak
yep,
until suddenly my gauge is
yep,
0 and I ain't got shit for CO2 and I
I
have to
know.
go lug this
So
20-pound cylinder.
so that's and the way you get around that is by having a pH controller because
Yes.
the pH controller will always be measuring the water so you would know. Um So that brings up a point. Always make sure you have some Teflon plumber's tape on hand. It's really cheap. I didn't know what it was before I started this because I can't DIY anything. But Steven's like, of course, everybody has this. But
I've
I
got
don't know
several
these
rolls
things.
of it because I always lose it. So I have to buy another one.
Right. It's cheap and you want to replace it every single time. You want to have it around the bubble counter. You want to have it all around that,
Mhm.
all around those joints. And I just replace it every single time because it always needs it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brooklyn's got that covered because her husband is a plumber and
There
natural
you
gas fitter, so
go.
he's got all that stuff.
You know what? And he can set your regulator up for you, Brooklyn. He can help you with that because you do need a wrench to torque open those bolts. And I do find that difficult. My hands and wrists are just not that great. So, but
I don't know. She's got some skills. I mean, she's been like
Brooklyn,
remodeling her house.
Brooklyn doesn't have these, Brooklyn's more jacked than I am. I'm fine with that. So I'm fine with that. I don't need to be good at everything.
She's younger than both of us too, so
This is true. But yeah, so make sure you get that. Most CO2 systems that you buy, they have a check valve integrated in. So the bubble counter has a check valve, but I put another check valve on
I do
there
too.
anyways, because, just like with your air stone, if you run an air stone, if you don't have a check valve in there when it's turned off, and because, cohesive force of water, it siphons out of your tank and you have a wet floor and nobody wants that. So I always use a check valve. Even though it has an integrated check valve in it, I don't care. I have another one.
Hmm.
But they also they have a bubble counter with it, so you have some visual of like your CO2 running. But the joins around those bubble counters, that's where your leaks usually are. So I always put the plumber's tape around all of those, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. So we'll start taking questions, but then let's while we're waiting for questions to come in, we can talk about the drop checkers.
Yeah, so drop checkers, they're not super accurate. So what they do have is they have a reference solution that I think is KH5 or
It's
KH6.
4. They have different ones. There's a
They do have
4 and I
different
think
ones,
there's a maybe it's an 8
yeah.
or something. Like, and a lot
Yeah,
of people say you should have both so you really know for sure exactly how much CO2 you got, but I use the KH4 one.
yeah, and
And
then so it has a pH indicator,
right.
which changes color depending on the pH of the reference solution. So it's got, I mean, Steven just showed a picture of it, but it's got a bend in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so the water flows up into it, but it can't flow over the bend.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can see right here, this is my living room tank, lime green. Um, that's basically,
Mhm.
I use this now to know, like, that's how I figure out, oh, I'm out of CO2 when I see it blue and it's not supposed
Yeah.
to be
Well,
blue.
and see, I can see mine off because I use that inline diffuser.
Yeah.
But what happens is the the drop checker is underwater, but it's got a bell of air. So the
Hmm.
CO2 comes out of solution of the aquarium water, and then that gaseous CO2 diffuses over to the reference solution, which is not touching your aquarium water, but it has an indicator in it that will change color as it's different pHs. And I aim for my drop checker to turn yellow, not green, yellow.
Like
That's
yellow, like this is lime green. It's gearing towards yellow. Do
Yeah,
you like it yellower than
I like
that?
it. I like it pretty yellow. But the most important thing is you have to watch your fish. If your
Yes.
fish are acting twitchy, fussy, if they're gasping at the surface, you just have to turn it down. And the first time that you set up your CO2, you want to do it like on a weekend when you're home, and you can go over and look at your fish every, 20 or 30 minutes, see how they're doing.
Yeah.
And you've got to turn it down. Some fish are a little fussier than others. I mean, you just get to the point where you can kind of,
Oh yeah, just funny. Ivy comes in late and she just like, oh, y'all are not speaking any language I've heard
well, you should have come here at
of.
the beginning, Ivy. But you've got to observe your fish and see how they're feeling. And you get to the point where you can see how much CO2 you can add without things getting unhealthy.
Right. There, I mean, there is a range, and not all of mine are lime green. Some of them are like blue green because like I'm not like trying to maintain that tank every 3 days. I just trying to give it a
Yeah,
little bit of a
and
boost.
I can't. I will say that a lot of algae problems are solved by turning your CO2 up. If you have
Mm.
no fish in a tank, you can turn the CO2 up as high as you want. It simply does not matter. Your plants will always be happy because the truth is this is you will never dissolve as much CO2 in water as is in the atmosphere.
Somebody was asking about that on Thursday night. Is there a maximum amount of CO2 if you don't have fish in there? And I was wondering, like, is there a point where where it gets so acidic that it's
No.
actually detrimental for the plants?
No, they don't care because the thing is, this is you can never dissolve that much water. At a certain point, you can't dissolve any more CO2 in the
Hmm.
water.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
$20 to
Very
shout
nice of
plants.
you. Yay,
Plants.
plants! Yay! That's so nice of you. Yeah, you can turn it up as high as you want if you have no livestock in there. But livestock, there's
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm never gonna have a tank that does not have animals in it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna either. Even if I had a plant farm, I would always be like, oh, just I gotta get some algae eaters in there at least. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah,
Speaking
I
of which, I do need to get some algae eaters in there.
yeah, yeah. So I would never have a tank without some animals in it. But yeah.
Yeah. So for those who filled out the form for the members, just be a little bit be patient. I've seen what y'all are looking for. I'm adjusting. Uh, Surprisingly, Kelly, what do you think of all the stems would be the most in demand?
I would think maybe like alternate there or Nikkei would be popular,
That
but
was not a
but
choice.
it's
I don't have
pogo
enough.
stem.
Yeah,
People want pogo stem enchiladas.
they do.
That's crazy. I hate
My wife is also like, what?
that is such a weed, man. But you know what? If you have a brand new tank and you just need something fast growing in it, there you go. Nothing grows faster. Yeah.
So yeah, just I'll double up on that plant and we'll be good to go. So I'm seeing I don't see any questions quite yet. Let's see, you said I'm going to add the 125 to CO2. I am confused about the inline thing. You have an FX6. So none of the inline diffusers that you can buy off the shelf will fit the hosing for an FX6. I think the FX6 is 1 inch.
Yeah, I use different 1 inch tubing. I didn't use their like
The rigid,
rigid.
the ridged,
I just
whatever.
use ordinary filter hose. You can switch it out for that. And it
Yeah.
works just fine. And it doesn't leak. I mean, I've
Yeah. In fact,
had it for years.
I do have a Fluval canister filter that uses that hosing on there, and I got like this. I forgot who made it. This green hosing just to put this diffuser on there.
Yeah, I think mine is clear. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's ordinary vinyl filter
Yeah,
hosing.
just put it out of sight because it's
Yeah,
gonna look gross really, really soon.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's what stands are for.
Yep.
Yeah. For a 125, I might consider getting a reactor. They
Dee Dee
do
can build one without.
Didi. Yeah. Oh, there you go, Didi. You
Yeah.
can build one. You're better than I am at such things. So yeah, yeah. So Berkeley, um, blue is what the reference solution looks like when it's out of the bottle. When it's in your tank in the morning, as it gets more CO2 in the water, it gets more yellow. So they say on the
Right.
package that green is the sweet spot, but I find more like at least yellowy green is probably better, if not
Yeah,
just yellow.
I think they do say lime green to
Yeah,
be the ideal. And now, yeah, if it's turning yellow, doesn't mean that you are going to kill your fish, but
depends
you
on your
want
fish.
to. You might be entering the danger zone, so you do want to pay attention to your
And
fish.
it depends on the kind of fish you have in there. Some of them are
Hmm.
more fussy, and I have not kept every single kind of fish.
Yeah,
So there may be some fish that can't handle any CO2 injection. I haven't heard any about it, but I haven't kept every fish, so I can't say for certain.
yeah.
I can tell you that rainbows don't care one bit.
As long as they can breathe.
They don't care.
Yeah, and the pH drop, they don't miss a beat. Doesn't
And
bother them at
I
all.
mean, my friend Greg Zidek, who has the most gorgeous tank I've ever seen in my life. I think he drops his pH 1.5 every day. He uses KH0 water, and his tanks are, I've never seen more amazing tanks. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I imagine so.
I mean, he's a real scientist with how he does things. They're
Mhm.
gorgeous. He goes all those high tech stems, but he uses pure water. But he does add a GH booster because plants do need GH. They need calcium and magnesium.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And usually the GH boosters will have potassium in them as
Yep.
well.
Yeah. All plants need
Yeah.
potassium.
And my tap water's got none of those things. No calcium, no magnesium, no potassium, no
And, I,
iron.
and I've got plenty of that. This is Midwest
Mm,
water. We have
yeah.
plenty of that. All the hardness is from calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate in the Midwest. So,
Just sodium carbonate over here.
yep. Well, do we have more questions? I mean, so have people
Um
gotten their packages yet from you, Stephen?
oh yeah, most people probably have. There's a few stragglers because, post office.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And hopefully people aren't too disappointed in the quantity. Like I thought, I'd be able to send people at least a few stems, but like if everybody wants pogo, then I can send you a
Yeah.
stem. But the good news is it's pogo, and
I'm
you'll
stepping
have multiple stems if you.
I swear you could grow that plant in a toilet bowl. I mean, it's the easiest plant.
Yeah, and because of the leaves being so narrow, it doesn't suffer from like getting super leggy because of the lighting either.
It doesn't care.
You can just have it like grow all the way across the top of the
Yeah.
tank if you really, really want to.
Yeah.
Who am I to judge?
Yeah.
Duckweed. Oh yeah, if anyone wants duckweed, I guess I can send you
I
some of
have
that.
this is a weird thing. I've never been any good at growing duckweed with any of the water I've had. I mean, part of it is because I always use spray
Yeah,
bars.
that's exactly what it
Yeah,
is.
I think that's why. I don't think I've ever had duckweed in any of my ponds, but the goldfish would eat all of it. So I'm really not great at duckweed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
what
Greg
are
says, finally making the jump to CO2 really changed my hobby for the better. I've spent more money on plants than fish lately. Yeah, see, that's what happened when I went to CO2. I'm currently in that extreme collectoritis phase where I'm trying
yeah,
to figure out what I can grow and what I like.
and that's a fun thing. Like I kind of have gone through the phase of collecting a bunch of stuff and figuring out what I like. And now I do know what I like and I can kind of aquascape and garden with that. So it's exciting. I saw a question above there. Let's see.
And yeah,
So, some ways to increase efficiency of dissolving CO2. So, it's kind of a double edged sword. You do want some surface agitation to your water. So, I point my spray bars up. That's because I want a lot of exchange with the atmosphere to get oxygen in the water. However, if you've got too much splashing and stuff going on, you're going to
yeah,
lose
it's off.
dilution of your CO2. And if you're having trouble getting enough CO2 in your water, that's something to look at. I do have air stones in my tanks, but I only run them at night. Now, some people run theirs all day, but I just run them at night. I have plenty of oxygen in the water. So if you have an air stone, maybe just run it at night.
Um,
Um,
Placement of the Neo diffuser can help. So
yeah,
they want you to have it in the path of current, but it's not always efficient to have it come up right where your filter outlet is. If your tank is small enough and you can get the current from the filter outlet all the way across the tank, if you have your diffuser on the opposite side of where your filter is coming out, it will actually be more efficient at like hitting the bubbles and dispersing it throughout the tank, which
yeah. You can
just
also use
depends.
a bigger diffuser. So
Yeah.
the diameter of this fritting makes a difference. You can get a bigger one, and that's going to
Yeah.
give you more dissolution. So
Like the
you
Neo has small, medium, and large.
yeah, and you might want a bigger one. Is that the one the co-op sells, the Neo?
They have before. I don't know if they currently do, and I don't
Yeah.
know if they sell all the
I mean,
sizes.
I just got this one on Amazon. I can't remember what makes it. I think it's like Jardley or something. But you can
I
get
had that exact one, and I broke it, and I was mad
no.
because it was
Oh,
glass.
so here's a tip. So when you're putting the CO2 tubing on there is a little bit rigid compared to other type tubing. So you want to take some boiling water and dip
Yeah,
the tubing in it, get it nice and soft, and then put it on and take your time. Don't force it. But yeah, they're easy to break.
they are.
They're easy to break. But try a bigger one that can
Hmm.
help. Make sure it's not coated in algae. You want to soak it before you put it in. Give it like a 10-20 minute soak in just in plain water. And that what that does is it allows the fritted glass to fully saturate before you try to use it.
Hmm.
So yeah, make sure it's clean. Make sure it's placed right. Try a bigger one. Don't run an air stone. I think those are the best tips I got for you.
Yeah, I put my air stones on the smart plug timers, so they just run at night.
Yeah, me too. And I love those CASA timers. Like, I think they're really easy to use. And I am not good at technology. So if I can find them easy, like anyone can, and they're cheap
Yeah.
too. And you can get them at the co op. And yeah, I really like those.
Hmm.
So, rock hard tank says I stopped using a drop checker. I run low CO2. Just make sure my pink flamingos are happy and call it good. Yeah, and that's the thing. You don't have to do maximum dissolution of CO2 if you're getting what you want out of your system. Like, eh, if you're not getting a ton of algae that you don't want, if your plants are growing at the speed you want, a little bump of CO2 maybe is all you need. But if you're getting a ton of algae and you're not happy about that, turning your CO2 up can really help.
Brooklyn says, "Run a quick poll." I'll do that. Really, I'll do that
What's
right
our
now in chat.
poll for? What's our poll?
Poll is CO2 anyone, and we want to find out who's got it, who
Yeah,
wants it, and who's
I
not
really want
interested.
to know.
Let's see.
Yeah, I
All
want to
right,
know
got
who's
it.
thinking about it too. Please don't be scared. I am bad at technology, really bad at it, and I think my very first tank had CO2, and within 3 months I was running pressurized CO2, and I was brand new to keeping aquarium. So you can do it. You can do it.
All right. The poll is posted. If you're lurking, hey, get back in the chat real quick and answer the poll. We only have a minute and before we got to go over to Austin.
Yeah,
Fantastic
Mom,
Freaks.
we have a link for Fantastic Freaks.
Yeah, Annette's been modding.
Oh,
She's
she's doing such a good job. She's getting Fat Kitty subscribers.
maybe we'll have some Fat Kitty content. Hey,
You can go to my
Austin. Thank you.
Instagram page. There's pictures of Fat Kitty there. Well, thank you,
Nice.
Fantastic Freaks. Thank you.
Where did the poll
That's gonna
go?
put Steven's kids through college. Thank you.
All right. Berkeley, you don't see the poll? It should be there. We got 26 votes so far. Already got it, 38%. Want it, 33%. Not interested, 30%. So 27 votes. Wow, it's almost split of the got it, want it, not interested.
Yeah. And if I had different, my goals were different. If I were really into fish breeding and that was it, or if I had super soft water, maybe I wouldn't. But kind of plants are my jam. So,
Yeah, not necessarily, Brookley. She's asking the more CO2, the less algae. I can explain that to you later, but essentially, CO2 is going to help your plants utilize photosynthesis more, and so if you can, you got to make sure your plants are out competing the algae, no matter
yeah,
what. That's the goal: is your plants have to outcompete the algae.
I think it helps though.
It
I will
does help.
back
It
it.
does, just
It
not the
does.
cure.
It's not the cure, but it helps.
All right,
With
folks.
gorgeous looking plants.
Yep. So 41%, so 34 votes, 41% not interested, and then 29 and 29 are want it and already got it.
Yeah.
For the rest of you not interested, if there's apprehension, don't be
Yeah.
scared. Suck
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I guess I think that like if you have a show tank that you really, really want to have great looking plants, maybe try it on one tank. Don't put it on your whole fish room because the other problem is, man, like Mary Page she opened up some plants I sent her and she's like, I can't believe how much plants these are. It's from one tank. It's like, well, that's every month. That's, that's the way that goes.
It's like it's either
So,
you or we put it in the trash.
yeah. So, you know, there, there's that too. So maybe just try it on one tank. Try it on,
Hmm.
a show tank that's in your living room or something that you really want to have great plants. So,
Yep. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for stopping by. As
yeah.
always, if you have questions that we didn't get to, or you come up with questions later, just add them as a comment. We'll come back and we will try to answer them.
Thank you,
Otherwise,
everyone.
see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.